Now before I go on, you may want to check the story in the link box and actually read the article on this story before you listen to this video or comment, because it's essential that you understand the story before you say anything. This is critique on the story on the Sky News website and the Independent. Now I've seen this story in the Voice newspaper and online, and I've been waiting to see other people's opinions, but I haven't really seen anything. So I thought it's high time I spoke on the matter as someone on Facebook forwarded this story to me. Now before anyone says anything, let me make this statement crystal clear to everybody. I am by no means whatsoever defending these two boys and what these boys did. I repeat, I am by no means defending these boys and what they did. So any comments that come along suggesting otherwise will be deleted, and the person that makes the comment will be blocked. Straight up. Now back to the story. These two boys, Brandon Jolie and Kingsley Ogundele, went on to assault this pregnant girl because she was pregnant with Brandon's child, and he didn't want her to have his child as he simply didn't want to be a father. The way they went about the whole thing was disgusting. However, let's look a bit deeper into the situation before we completely demonise just the two boys without question. Now the way the article on this story has been written makes you give the contrast on both the boys and the girl, like the boys are evil and she is good. Now take away what the boys did for a minute. She is a 17-year-old pregnant girl, soon to be a mother. Now if you go back to some of my videos, you already know our opinion on that as far as young mothers are concerned. So let's not spare her criticism just because of what happened to her, because that gives her and others the incentive to take a deluded avenue thinking it's normal to have kids at 17, when in actual fact it's not normal. She is under the same scrutiny we give all single mothers who bring children into this world with no real consideration. I don't see people holding back on their opinions about the Samantha Arobata situation when she got pregnant in prison overseas, as she is under fire from both men and women, but the reason for that is because there is no man in the public eye to put the blame on. But you can be sure if we had a mugshot of the man that gave her the drugs to peddle overseas, or a mugshot of the man that got her pregnant in prison, the majority of us would be completely forgetting what Samantha Arobata did, as blaming the man is standard protocol. I call this attitude tabloid redux syndrome. Now back on topic to the story at hand. We know that the young girl was assaulted and almost killed. She's a young mother at the age of 17, and the two boys were also in their teens. But the way we interpret the story is like we are allowing ourselves to think that this girl is innocent. She is clearly the victim of a savage attack. She is not innocent for anything else. This should not allow us to not point out her conduct. Now, we know that a boy and a girl had unprotected sex, leading to pregnancy, and he didn't want to be the father, but the girl clearly did. Her comments quoted in the article suggest as much, so it's safe to assume that she wanted to have the child, even though the boys career-wise did have some form of life to live. Brandon was a creative boy in the music business, but didn't want to lose that by having a child so soon. These two teenage boys' actions show that they both handled the situation very poorly due to a lack of understanding and how to deal with the situation, because there's no support network for young fathers when they have kids, giving them advice, telling them how to handle these issues that come with being a young father. That's right. This has now become a men's rights issue. But wait, heavenly truth, this hasn't stopped other fathers from handling their business, so what difference does it make? And are you not making excuses for what these boys have done? Well, firstly, it makes a big difference. And secondly, I'm not making an excuse. I already said I don't condone their actions. However, you ought to consider this. Their conduct could have been for many reasons, and the most obvious for most of you would be to say that the boys are just evil. And I'm happy to accept that, but me being the man that I am, I like to look into things a lot deeper and come with substantial solutions. How would you feel if I told you that I have had many conversations with young boys who said that they was thinking of doing the same kind of thing because they got a girl pregnant, but they don't want to be fathers? You then realise this is a problem that's not going to go away overnight, and this news article is the first scenario like this that we have noticed, but it won't be the last time something like this happens, believe me. So how do we deal with it? I've seen and heard young men discussing how they would deal with being in a situation like this involving a young girl being pregnant for them. I've heard the following: punch or kick her in the stomach, push her down the stairs, poison her. The barbaric list goes on, but what makes a young man feel like this brutal style of DIY abortion is an option? Well, there's lots of support for single mothers and soon-to-be mothers, while men don't have nearly as much support. How do any of us know that this young girl wasn't being very uncooperative with the boy while she was pregnant? How do we know that she wasn't threatening to have his child and ruin his life with the child, basically being completely vindictive, using whatever threat she could to let him know his life is going to revolve around her every whim? Let's not pretend that this doesn't happen, because we know it does. How do we know that the child may have had a number of boys and men who could have also possibly been the father, making the boys skeptical about the paternity of the child? In other words, they wasn't sure that it was actually Brandon's child. How do we know that before finding out she was pregnant, she didn't claim she was going to take the morning after pill, but then she didn't, or didn't take any contraception properly, making the man powerless to the outcome, with the exception of using a condom, of course? The answer is, we don't know. Now, I'm sure you're all going to say that he should have strapped up and used a condom, but that line gets thrown right back at you because that comment is far too common. Besides, I've heard even women use the concept of condoms splitting and coming off to justify their misconduct, and they don't receive the same scrutiny. Many women try to convince a man to go without a condom and then promise to take the pill after, but now I guess this is where women say a man shouldn't listen to a woman. That's a complete contradiction, because I don't listen to women on YouTube, but I get shunned for that by the same women, so it's clear that we're dealing with a boy that is manipulated by women because he isn't part of this support network. And this support network encourages men to tell a woman to step off and overcome her wants. But don't forget how we get labelled by the very same women when we adopt this attitude. So it's a complete contradiction in itself when women start talking about condoms. Anyway, the point is, we are all taking a stance on the character of this young mother, like she's completely innocent, just because the boys have been demonized, because for most stories there has to be a hero and a villain. These are all the things we should be asking when we hear or read stories in regards to gender relations, because there's an important part of the story that many of us choose to miss out due to a bad habit of assuming that the man is 100% at fault and the woman is the victim. I pointed out as much in my video, Baby Daddy Blame Game. Now moving on. Let's talk about the way that these articles were structured on these two boys. The parts of the story that I found really interesting was the way that they spoke of the boy. They associated the grime scene, his real name and stage name, with the story, so right there they mix up a genre of music with it, even though grime has nothing to do with this story. But grime and rap is something that is very popular around the youth in their teens, particularly black males. They pointed out that this boy Brandon Jolie had worked on some of the soundtrack in EastEnders. But what the real killer was that got me was the way that they presented a picture of Tinchy Stryder in the article, mentioning that he'd worked with him previously. What on earth has Tinchy Stryder, another black youth who was not involved in the assault, have to do with any of this? Now I guess you're saying that's no big deal, as Brandon was a producer for him, and they mentioned other things that he'd done in music, and other things he was associated with as far as performing arts is concerned, and you're right. But I don't recall seeing any picture of the sound engineering team of EastEnders, or even a picture of the girl herself. All we see is a picture of the offenders, Brandon Jolie and Kingsley Ogundele, and another black man who had nothing to do with any of it, Tinchy Stryder. Let us now cut through the fog of media bullshit. They are trying to categorize all black men and bash the black man, and they think we're too stupid to even notice it. This is how the media behaves when it comes to black males, especially young black males. They like to associate them with things like this in order to demonize as many black boys as possible. And they've done an excellent job, because I have not heard and seen anyone addressing what I'm saying now. Meaning that we just accept it. Well, I don't. This black man in no way will lay down and accept the demonization of a few black men and let Uncle Toms, thug blamers and racists with tabloid reader syndrome use this as an opportunity to categorize all black men as evil, and then allow that to make them feel justified about the increase of stop and search procedures and zero tolerance laws on normal black men minding their own business, just because people can't comprehend and see the big picture and the dynamics of a system that works against black men. Fuck no. Now, I was surprised that The Voice didn't mention any of this, but then at the same time I was more disappointed in myself that I expected them to notice. But hey, that's life with some of these people. Anyway, not only did the news articles in Sky News and The Independent take liberties with the Tinchy Stryder association, they took it even deeper by using obvious mugshots and then using a picture of the grime artist Brandon Jolie using gang signs. This is how creative a black man's enemies in the media becomes, because I've seen other pictures of people and they tend to use school photos or pictures that don't make them look completely evil at every turn, with the exception of the mugshot. But no, they wanted to make sure that the young black male got the full demonization service, so that anything resembling him outside of the story would also be lumped in the same category by people that believe everything they read and watch. So any man making signs of his fingers on Facebook better watch out. Now you're probably asking, how does this affect all black men, Heavenly Truth One? I'm glad you asked and I'll tell you in my next video.